posted about our argument on Reddit, but I didn't know he was a famous moderator. Hello, Reddit. My name is Marie, and I'm 28 years old. I'm a fashion designer, and I used to live with my boyfriend of 7 years. Well, until he threw me out following the recent happenings. I have tried so hard to get back in his good books, but he just wants nothing to do with me at all. I had posted about our argument on Reddit, but I didn't know he was a famous moderator, and he had deleted the post, but ended things with me after that, and refused any attempt of reconciliation from my side. I know, what kind of girlfriend doesn't know what her boyfriend does, especially someone who you've been together with for that long? He probably will not delete this post, seeing that I am recounting all my sins for the world to see what a horrible girlfriend I was to him. I love Daniel, and I'd only been so angry when we fought and had just needed a space to pour out my feelings. Thinking back, I realized it was a silly thing we had argued about, and I had been the one who just escalated the whole thing out of proportion. I expected an apology as usual, and I hadn't gotten it, so I had just angrily gone online and posted about our argument. I had written it in such a way that everything had seemed like his fault, but here I am again to tell the real truth, even though the lie was never really posted. I really don't want to lose Daniel because I love him so much. Daniel and I had met during a freelance job I got through a friend of mine. I was employed to style models for a photo shoot. Although the pay was quite measly, I had no choice because I wanted to get some sort of connection. I have always been one of those wannabes. I always took advantage of any situation that came my way to showcase my work, even if it meant little pay and extra work. After the photo shoot, they had asked me to stay for a fashion show and showcase 2 of my masterpieces. I had always wanted to be a fashion designer right from when I was young. My parents, though, had been against it because they saw fashion designers as people without a stable means of income, and that it was hard to live a stable life, especially with something that one might not even be popular with. I had objected, of course, and when I was fresh out of high school and my parents had wanted me to study accounting, I had run away from home but was found days after. My parents finally accepted my choice and left me to do my own thing. I had been so excited and happy because it had felt like the breakthrough I needed when they had asked me to showcase my work. So I had put in extra work and worked really hard to give the best dress. My dress had won the best dress of the night, and by the end of the show, I had people piling up to collect my contacts so I could design clothes for them. Daniel had been the brother of the owner of the fashion show and had watched the entire show, so he walked up to me and congratulated me. He had also collected my contact information, and I had thought it had been yet another business deal. I had been really excited, and for the next 2 months, I was busy designing clothes for models, famous influencers, and many others too. I was able to save enough money to get myself a rented space for my workshop and also got an apartment, although not the exact space I had wanted because I had been duped of my money when I had contacted this man who had told me he could get my dream workspace for me at a cheaper rate. So I did not have enough money after being duped to get the space I wanted exactly, but I had to make do with it. It was only after 3 months that Daniel had contacted me and had asked me to a friendly dinner date with him. I had agreed because despite the nerves I had during the fashion show, I had noticed him where he sat. I had fun with Daniel on the date, and we started hanging out even more often. Daniel told me he worked as a freelancer. He didn't want to be tied down to a place or spot, and he hated a 9-5 job, so he avoided them with passion. Daniel was, and still is, really attractive. He had this aura of a dangerous playboy, if you didn't know him personally. But Daniel was very gentle, and he listened more than he spoke. I had always been talkative in the relationship, or maybe I had made it out to be so. I mean, I never truly did listen whenever Daniel did have an opinion. I was right, and I wanted to remain right, and I would at that point risk anything, including a fight, just to prove a point. Daniel never yelled at me or anything, and despite being indoors mostly working on whatever job he got his hands on, he managed to have many admirers, especially the opposite gender. His sister, who had been the host of the fashion show, would always update his wardrobe every 2 months into something different. He had this build that could easily make him pass for a bodyguard, and whenever I was out with him, he made me feel safe. I hated the fact that his sister always updated his wardrobe, so I somehow managed to get her to stop that. I had argued with Daniel that day to stop his sister from sending clothes when I could easily make them, and Daniel had just shrugged, thinking I was joking. The next time she had sent him clothes, I had picked each one and shredded them into pieces that couldn't be put together again. Daniel had, for the first time since we became lovers, gotten really angry with me, but I had apologized severally, and he had forgiven me, but had agreed to tell his sister to stop sending him clothes. We didn't have any issues until I decided I was just not comfortable with his job. Daniel was educated, and he had a degree in computer science, and he was really good at it. But he preferred being employed as a freelancer rather than getting a stable job, and it started to irritate me. The first 2 years of our being together, I really was okay with his lifestyle. Despite the fact that he worked from home, he was usually so busy and could spend all day on his computer doing some jobs. But he still had a lot of time on his hands to party or go out with friends, as he would like if he intended to, since he wasn't tied to an office chair all day or a sewing stool like I was. But yet he didn't. He would rather spend his time working than go out. That's enough not to suspect him. He was almost a saint. He never drank or smoked. All that should have removed my doubt about Daniel, but instead, it intensified it. I hated that he had no noticeable flaws. He was almost perfect, and it made my own imperfections and insecurities very visible, and I kind of took it out on him by picking fights on little things, so I would somehow get him to react instead of apologizing like he usually did. Daniel tolerated all of my odd behaviors and constant nitpicking. One time, I had been invited to a party, and I was supposed to bring a +1, but Daniel had a deadline and couldn't go with me, so I had gone alone, and it was at that party I met Zach for the very first time. He had been alone too, and according to him, his own date had left him to hang out with her friends. He had apparently wanted to come with his sister as his date, but she had chosen movie night with her friends rather than be her brother's escort to a boring event, as she had called it. We started to just talk casually, and Zach had been extra flirty throughout the conversation. He hadn't even hidden the fact that he was interested in me, and I just relished the attention. In my head, I thought it would only be for the night, the whole thing with Zach, so I just enjoyed his company and attention. When the night was finally over, Zach had invited me for lunch the next Friday, which had been 4 days after the party, and I had agreed. Daniel had been curious about my night out when I got home, and I had recounted the details of the party but evaded the details about Zach. For some reason, I didn't want Daniel to find out about Zach. We hadn't even done anything yet at that time, but I just felt like I was cheating on Daniel just flirting with Zach. Zach had kept to his promise of a date that Friday, and we had gone out to a local restaurant that I had never been to before. The meals had been very nice for a first-time taste, and Zach had bragged jokingly about his great choice in restaurants. We agreed to meet again, but I had told him the truth about my relationship, and that we could only be friends, and Zach had been cool with that. I still did not tell Daniel anything about Zach, even though we had agreed to just be friends. Most times when I hung out with Zach, I would usually lie that it was a friend of mine that Daniel knew that I was hanging out with, and Daniel, being Daniel, never doubted me. Zach and I continued our friendship, and eventually we stopped hanging out in public places as he invited me to his house. We would talk, and I even told him stuff about my relationship, my fears, insecurities, and the constant nagging feeling that I always had that Daniel would not settle for me. We had been together 5 years then, and he mentioned marriage, yes, but as a passing comment. He had always said he would want to get a space big enough to have kids before we got married. But somehow, I still doubted his words. So when I told Zach about it, he had created more doubts in my head about Daniel, telling me that any guy who wouldn't settle for that long might not be serious about me. Before long, Zach got into my pants. I mean, literally. I guess I made it easy for him because when he had tried, I hadn't even objected. But after the first time, I was stuck with guilt. I loved Daniel, not Zach. I know that for sure. But Zach just had a way of making me feel that is different from how Daniel made me feel. A week passed before I saw Zach again after the first time we had sex. Daniel had traveled home, and I had taken time off work that day, and Zach had appeared at my doorstep. How he knew my place was a big surprise to me, especially because he knew that I lived with Daniel. When I had confronted him about it, he had told me he would have lied to Daniel that he needed some sort of house description if it had been him who opened the door. I invited him reluctantly because I couldn't have the neighbors listening in on our conversation, and Zach had made himself at home. That was one thing that had drawn me to Zach. He was very daring and audacious, and he liked to dominate a room like he owned it. I wanted to dismiss him quickly, but Zach ended up staying till the evening, and we even had sex numerous times before he left. When Daniel had come back the next day, he had asked if we had a visitor, because one of the neighbors had told him he had a guest that stayed a while before leaving. I had quickly lied that it had been a customer who had been directed to the house because I did not go to work. Daniel had believed me and asked no further questions, which relieved me. After about a month of my secret affair with Zach, Daniel bought a house and started paying the mortgage. To be honest, I had not even asked how he got the money to pay in the first place. I was just excited because it meant our wedding preparations would start. But Daniel had asked me to hold on until he paid the mortgage before we got married, so we could move into our house debt-free. But instead of understanding his point, I had been really upset, and I had left the house. I went over to Zach's place and refused to go home for 2 days. Daniel kept calling and texting me, apologizing, but I just wouldn't respond. It had been until he had texted me that my parents had called him to tell him they were in town and wanted to come greet us that I had left Zach's place and gone home. I had pretended everything was fine with us while my parents were around until they left. Daniel had apologized again and tried to explain why he wanted things that way, and I eventually forgave him. But Zach kept giving me reasons to doubt Daniel's intentions, and I foolishly went along with it, and most times I had picked fights with Daniel for no reason at all. I remember now the day Daniel had called me so excited that I should come home from work because he had some news, but I had been at Zach's place, and he had told me how selfish Daniel was, and that he didn't want me happy. Thinking back now as I write, I realize that the words Zach said should never have even affected me or taken a hold in my heart the way they did. But I just wanted to get some validation of some sort, and that has now caused me trouble. When I got home that day, and Daniel had tried to tell me about his new job, I had only been half listening, and when he realized that, he had stopped talking about it. At that point, it pleased me that he understood the mood I was in, but now I realize just what a stupid thing I had done. I remember the day I came across this app, Reddit. I had been bored and just swiping through my phone and had seen a post that caught my eye, and I had read it, and before long I had read many others too. It was quite addicting reading about different people's problems, opinions, comments, and everything else. I even created an account just to comment too. I remember coming across the post of a woman who had hidden her name and every other means of identification, and she had posted that she had cheated on her husband and he had caught her red-handed, and he wanted not only a divorce, but a signed document handing over the full custody of their 4 kids to her husband. I had even commented on the post and said demeaning things about her, because I believed she had clearly not been thinking when she did what she did. But somehow, that did not boot my brain into thinking that I might just be headed in the same direction, only that I wasn't married or had kids. I didn't figure then that my situation might just be as bad as that woman's case is now. I spent less time with Daniel and more time with Zach and on the Reddit app reading different stuff that was quite interesting. Daniel tried to get our relationship back on track, but I was just too in between and, for some reason, didn't want to stop my lifestyle of cheating. I mean cheating big time, because I did not only cheat on Daniel with Zach, but also with another guy named David. I met David through Zach. David and Zach had apparently been childhood friends and had retained their friendship over the years despite the distance. So David had come visiting Zach for a week, and I knew he found me really attractive, which made me kind of excited. Within 3 days of knowing David, he and I had sex, and Zach knew nothing about it. We both decided to keep it a secret from Zach. But eventually, Zach found out and was so upset about it that he threw David out of his house. He, of course, couldn't throw me out because I was also cheating on Daniel with him. Daniel finally paid off the mortgage loan on the house, and he started discussing wedding plans with my parents and his. But somehow, I was so scared. I could never be enough for Daniel. I mean, he had many things going for him, and I only had my fashion designing, and even that wasn't much of anything. I felt detached and scared, so whenever Daniel brought up topics about our wedding, I evaded them. It also brought back the guilt of cheating on him. I loved Daniel so much, and I couldn't even imagine losing him if he ever found out about Zach. I honestly had tried to end things with Zach, especially after Daniel started discussing wedding plans, but Zach made things difficult. He had threatened to tell Daniel about us, and apparently had evidence of my indiscretions. So I couldn't end my relationship with Zach. I managed to convince myself that I did try to end things, but the truth is, I shouldn't have even started in the first place. One day, Daniel and I had a huge argument, and he had stomped out of the house and came back the next morning to apologize, but I had been too upset to even accept his apology. It had actually been my fault. Daniel and I had decided to spend the day together, and we had even arranged to have a picnic date at the beach, but Zach had called me, claiming he was very sick with the flu and begged me to help him get some drugs. I had rushed to get him the drugs, and my plans had been to just give him the drugs, ensure he ate, and come back home so I could go on the picnic with Daniel. But Zach had lied. He had not been down with the flu or even sick at all. He had just wanted me to come over, and he knew that had been the only way to get my attention. So I had been upset, but Zach apologized repeatedly, and then he seduced me into bed. By the time we were done with our sexual activities, it was way past noon, and I had numerous calls and texts from Daniel. I went back to the house, and when he asked for some sort of explanation, I made flimsy excuses, dismissed his worries, and even told him I was not a child to be monitored. That made Daniel really upset, and he just left the house and didn't come back until the next morning. I thought of different scenarios in my head throughout the night. I thought if he was with another lady who was calming him down. Not even the fact that I knew Daniel loved me too much to cheat on me was enough to remove those thoughts from my head. I became angry and upset and somehow made Daniel the sinner and me the one sinned against in my head. When he showed up the next morning, I ignored him despite his various means to apologize. I kept on the act for days and would snap at the tiniest thing. Daniel tried several times to get on my good side again, and he had only been able to do that when he got me a car on my birthday. 6 months before our 7th-year anniversary as a couple, I discovered that I was pregnant. I panicked because I did not know who exactly was the father. I knew telling either of them was an unwise decision because Daniel would want us to keep the baby, and the baby might end up not being his, hence ruining our relationship. And if I told Zach too, he would want to take advantage of that and try to ruin my relationship with Daniel. So, all the options about the pregnancy ended up with one result, and that was that no matter the decision I made, it would ruin my relationship with Daniel. So I took matters into my own hands and secretly saw a specialist who helped me get rid of the baby. Although I had complications during the whole thing and bled for days and almost died, I lied to Daniel that it was my menstrual cycle. Zach, although, did not know anything about it, both the pregnancy and even the abortion or the aftermath. I knew he would put 2 and 2 together and arrive at 4. A month after that whole thing, I became pregnant again, and this time Daniel found out I was pregnant, and he was so excited about the baby. But I panicked again. I felt it was too soon to be pregnant again after the last one, and I was sure this time that the baby was Zach's. Daniel had traveled during my ovulation period, and it had been Zach I had been sleeping with. If my calculations were correct, the weeks correlated with the time I slept with Zach and the baby being conceived. I had accidentally left the pregnancy kit test I had used on the bathroom floor, and Daniel had seen it and had been so excited about the whole thing. I, of course, did the usual thing, because I couldn't just have Zach's baby for Daniel. It felt like the highest sin I would ever commit, so I went again to abort the baby. Luckily, there were no complications this time, but I faked the loss of the baby so Daniel could know that there was no baby anymore. I had purposely slipped down the stairs, and when Daniel took me to the hospital, I had bribed the nurse there to tell him I lost the baby. Daniel had been so pained, but he pampered me very much to make up for the loss of the baby. It made me happy to be pampered that much, but my joy was cut short when Daniel discovered that I lost no baby. He had apparently gone to the hospital without telling me to ask some questions about what triggered the miscarriage. Being a good friend of the doctor, which I had not even been aware of before, he had been allowed to see him, and the doctor told him he had not been aware of any miscarriage and even checked my file just to confirm that. Daniel was so angry and confronted me, and when I tried to lie that I had not been pregnant at all, he didn't believe me. I eventually had to confess that I aborted the baby because I wasn't ready for a baby yet. I didn't tell him, of course, that the baby hadn't even been his to begin with. Daniel was so upset and swore angrily at me for making such a decision about our baby without letting him know. I had been shocked and then later angry that Daniel swore at me, and I aggravated the whole issue. I thought he would do what he usually does, leave the house and come back the next day and apologize to me, but Daniel had done none of that. In fact, he slept next to me in bed, but refused any body contact of any sort. The next day, he had gone on ignoring me, and instead of feeling sober and actually apologizing to him, I had decided to be angry too. So the next thing I had done was that I had gone on Reddit and made a post. I had written about our argument, and I had even feigned indifference about the fact that he wasn't even the father, and that I was only protecting him. I didn't use my real name when I made the post, so I thought no one would know who I was or anything like that, and I felt safe. But within 3 hours, I saw that my post had been taken down, and that had upset me. I posted it again in the exact same way I did the last time, and this time, my post had been taken down almost immediately. I was still reeling over my post being taken down when Daniel had come to me, and I had thought he had finally realized his mistakes and had come to apologize. But Daniel had passed his phone to me, and confused, I looked at it and saw a screenshot of the post which I made that was deleted. I was so shocked because I hadn't expected Daniel to use apps like that. He never said anything about the app whenever I rambled about the stuff I read on the app to him. I quickly realized I was covering my shock and asked why he was making me read a post. He asked me if I knew exactly what remote job he was doing at the moment. I shrugged and answered that it was probably something computer-related, and Daniel let out a short laugh, which made my heart skip a beat. He told me that he was the present moderator for Reddit, and he had been the one who deleted my post. I tried to deny that it wasn't my post, and he reminded me that he knew exactly who I am on the app, and that there was no need to deny it. Daniel told me to leave his house and never return because it was over between us. I tried several times to apologize, but he just didn't want to hear it, and just helped me move my things out of his house. So here I am again, but this time begging that you guys help me out. I love Daniel so much, and I really regret everything I did to hurt him, and I really cannot afford to lose him. Not now or ever. Please help me. Is there any way I could pay for my sins but still be with Daniel? Update. Hello, Reddit. Words cannot fully express just how sad and horrible and miserable I feel right now. Have you ever felt so empty, and yet that emptiness just hurts? Hurts so badly it takes your breath away each time? Well, that's how I feel right now, or is it every day of my life now? I feel like the most miserable person on earth right at this moment, and I caused everything. I caused this pain I feel. I'm the stupid woman who mistook insecurities as an excuse to cheat on the most perfect man that could have ever come her way. I cannot still comprehend just how easy it was to ruin everything I've ever loved and lived for. Everything just came crashing down, and I have no one to blame except myself. I could have done better. I could have been a better person. I could have just been happy and stuck with someone who loved me and not sought security and a boost of self-esteem from someone who never even really gave me. All Zach ever did was cast more doubts in my mind that I would never be enough, and yet I still went along with the flow. Well, the current had gotten too strong and had overwhelmed me now. Now I'm stuck in the bottomless pit of this dark prison that I have trapped myself in, with no one to get me out of. I would forever bear this pain, this guilt that seems so overwhelming, and it's absolutely my fault. The fact that you guys find such joy in coming after me, making very hateful comments, and backlashing me because I had confessed that it is one of the popular moderators I had broken his heart, is very painful, honestly. You guys just make it easier to hurt more. Reading your hateful comments on my posts makes the whole thing even more painful, and I do not know if it's possible to hurt more than I already do, but you guys make it easy. I wouldn't blame you, though. I brought everything upon myself, and the worst pain is knowing that I had the perfect man in my life, and I lost him due to my stupid actions. I hate myself more each day, and I did not think that was possible either. I've never felt as lonely as I feel right now. Now that I have all the time to reflect on everything I've ever done to Daniel, I realize just how much he had to endure being with me over all those years. The painful thing is, I'm realizing just how awful I had been, and it's now too late to make any amends. My parents don't even speak to me anymore, even though we stay in the same space, and it is almost as suffocating as the inside of my chest is. They found out what happened, and it hadn't even been Daniel that told them. It had been me. They wanted to know why Daniel had kicked me out of the house, and I had told them before they went to Daniel and heard it from him. They've hated me since then and refused to talk to me. I spend every moment now reminiscing and reminding myself just how easily I spoiled everything good in my life as a punishment. Daniel must hate me so much now, and he probably would never forgive me for all the things I did to hurt him. I understand perfectly well. I mean, I cannot even bring myself to forgive me for the things I've done. I wouldn't wish all these on the person I hate most in the world. It's a terrible pain having to deal with your own mistakes that have apparently cost you your whole life. I spend every day imagining if things had been different, if I hadn't cheated and had actually been pregnant with Daniel's baby. We would be a family now, expecting our first child and being happy. But I've ruined any chances of happiness for me right now. I don't think I'll ever be happy or recover from all of these. It's a cross I'll have to bear for the rest of my life for hurting and deceiving Daniel as much as I did. I desperately wish that I could somehow turn back the hands of time and undo some of the things I did to hurt Daniel. I wish I could have just not been selfish and stupid enough to fall for Zach's antics. Ever since Daniel threw me out of the house, I haven't seen or spoken to Zach. There was no need to because I haven't even thought about him since Daniel found out about us until now that I write. I wish I had never met him. And I wish I had never been so stupid as to believe his empty words over Daniel's promising ones. I just wish I had done better with my life. I cannot even go to work these days because there really is no inspiration to do anything other than stare at the walls in my old room and cry my eyes out. The future feels so empty and blank, really. There's probably nothing more for me there other than some more hurt and pain. I really, really regret everything I did to hurt Daniel, and I think I'll pay for that for the rest of my days. It really is hell on earth right now for me. Update. Hello, Reddit. It's me again. Yes, I know. You probably don't want to hear from me again because you feel I should probably be rotting in the deepest part of hell for what I've done. I know, and I wish that too, because maybe that will be better than my life right now. This is my last post here, and I'm making this just to apologize. To apologize to the one person that I caused the most hurt through my stupid actions, Daniel. I know that you probably don't want to hear anything from me again, and I know you probably hate me so much right now, but I just want to apologize, not so you could forgive me, but just to let you know that I'm paying so much for the pain I caused you, and I know I might not be able to finish paying for that until I leave Earth, but I will spend the rest of my life trying to make up for what I did to you. I'm truly sorry for being such a terrible, terrible person and girlfriend to you. You were the best gift that God has ever given me, and I, through my reckless acts, threw that away, and I will ever be sorry for that. I'm apologizing in hopes that you will read this last post of mine and perhaps find comfort in the fact that I will pay for my actions every breathing moment of mine. There will never be anyone like you, not now or ever. I'm so sorry I threw away everything we've built together for something as fleeting as an affair. I'm sorry I hurt you as much as I did. My life will probably remain the same, forever lost in the darkness I created for myself. I wish almost desperately that I had done right by you, but I know it's too late now to even think that. I'm not even worthy of wishing. I know. I love you so much, Daniel, and that knowledge alone will forever haunt me. Even though I'm not allowed to, I wish I could turn back the hands of time and be that person that I should have been to you from the beginning. I'm so sorry, Daniel. I'm so sorry. As much as it kills me to say, I really wish you all the happiness that I couldn't ever give you. I know that I could never make things up to you even by suffering this much, but I have no words, honestly. I just regret everything that I did. Everything. I wish life had do-overs or maybe a memory wipe. A do-over so I could relive this life and never make the mistakes I made, or a memory wipe so I could rid you of all the horrible memories I created for you, of me. And guys, I know how well you hate me. You've not exactly been discreet about it. But I wish you guys wouldn't end up like I did, despite all the warnings that were literally in my face. My life right now is a mess, and I'm a mess, and I would never wish for you guys to end up as I did. Thanks and goodbye.